We're getting closer to the end of year and 2025 is only a stone's throw away. Now we've had some disappointing games that released in 2024, but today we'll be looking at the very best. So grab a drink, adjust your gaming chair and relax. At number 10 is Echoes of Wisdom. Now I reviewed the game when it released and enjoyed my 22-hour playthrough. In this iteration you play as Zelda with mysterious rifts forming around the world. With Link out of the picture, it's Zelda's responsibility to save the citizens of Hyrule. Zelda's weapon is the Tri-Rod, which allows you to create echoes which are copies of enemies or objects. Now you'd use these echoes to assist you in battle as well as platforming. There were loads of platforming sections and puzzles that took me ages to figure out, and honestly I did get tilted with some of these. The game world was a nice size and wasn't padded out with extra fluff for the sake of it. The main story, whilst cliche, was enjoyable, and the game looks good as a whole with its vibrant colour scheme and chibi style character design. Echoes of Wisdom sold over 200,000 copies in its first week and over 2.5 million copies as of November. IGN gave it a 9, Eurogamer gave it a 9 and OpenCritic scored it a 91. Other reviewers shared the same issues that I ran into, which was the frame rate. Frames would drop throughout the entirety of the game and nothing pisses a gamer off more than dropped frames, baby. Up next is the Silent Hill 2 remake. Now the original came out in 2001 on the PS2 and sold over 1 million copies in the first month of its release. So how would the remake pale in comparison? Well, the remake stays true to the plot of the first game and you'll again be playing as James Sunderland. He receives a letter from his wife, but this is hard to believe considering his wife died 3 years prior. You can expect improved graphics with ray tracing being supported, the environments have been tweaked and made larger, with some previously blocked locations being accessible, and you now have an over-the-shoulder perspective as opposed to the fixed camera viewpoint seen in the original. James can also wear a pizza box version of Pyramid Head's mask. Now if I did this at home I'd get called a loser, but if James does it, it's cool. Well, grab me a pizza box, ladies and gents, because I'm about to start losing. Silent Hill 2 sold over 1 million copies in the first 4 days of its release. This makes it the most successful entry in the series. It's got a mighty rating on OpenCritic, with 95% of critics recommending the game. Coming in at number 8 is Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door remake. Now I played this in 2004 when it originally released on the GameCube. Chili Heatwave Doritos are just released in the UK, and I remember that because I tried them whilst playing this game. The Thousand Year Door is my favourite Mario game and one of the best titles on the GameCube. The game is an RPG, and in typical Mario fashion, Peach's been kidnapped and Plumber Boy needs to rescue her. The game is a unique 2D setting which gives it the paper look, turn-based combat which was handled excellently, and over 30 hours of gameplay, baby. But what does the remake do differently? Well, the visuals have been upgraded, a new soundtrack implemented, as well as quality of life improvements, like some tweaks to the fast travel system and increased item capacity. One aspect that baffles me is the remake runs at 30 FPS when the original ran at 60. I mean, it still looks good, don't get me wrong, but this is a step backwards. The original sold 2 million copies around the world in its lifetime. The remake has sold 2 million copies in the first 6 months, so it's been a success. IGN gave it a 9.1, with the remake scoring a 9. The frame rate reduction and lack of additional content were some of the main criticisms. It's still a great game and I highly recommend picking it up if you own a Switch. If you enjoy roguelikes, then it should be no surprise that Hades 2 makes the list. The game's currently in early access on PC and will eventually be ported to consoles, but with the intro out of the way, what exactly is Hades 2? Like the original, the game is a roguelike dungeon crawler, which means that when you die you'll have to restart from the beginning, with experience being carried over but losing things like boons and coins. Each dungeon is procedurally generated, meaning no 2 runs will be the same, and whilst the game does welcome new players, the difficulty will give anyone a challenge. If you enjoyed the first game, the gameplay is similar but has been expanded upon. You'll be playing as Melinoy, who's Argarius' little sister. There's a reworked companion system, as well as more environments and increased enemy variety. Despite being in early access, Hades 2 has received high praise across the board. It has a mighty rating on OpenCritic with a score of 90, and 100% of critics recommend it. But don't just take my word for it, as the Steam reviews are also exceptional. If you're still unsure about picking it up, I recommend trying the first game, as it goes on sale quite often for about $10. Yakuza Like a Dragon was the first Yakuza game I ever played, and that was all the way back in 2020. Since then I've played through all the mainline series, the Judgment series, as well as Like a Dragon Ishin. So it's fair to say I know my way around those Kamurocho streets, baby. You know where I'm going with this one, lads. Infinite Wealth is number 6. The game is an RPG where you'll be playing as Ichiban, the first game's protagonist, as well as Kiryu-chan, the protagonist from the original series. Both of these guys have had better days, but you can expect great turn-based combat, plenty of side quests in the form of sub-stories, and there's always a few wacky ones, as well as some of the best mini-games. Remember cabaret management in Yakuza 0? Of course you did, you pervert, cause Senor Donut remembers too, baby. If you enjoyed games like Persona, Dragon Quest or Metaphor, and yes they all have turn-based combat in common, then you'll want to play Infinite Wealth. The Yakuza series always has an interesting story, great character development, and plenty of stuff to do. It also won the award for excellence at the Japan Game Awards and sold over 1 million copies in the first week of its release. You don't have to be a AAA release or have a massive budget to produce a great game. Balatro is proof of this and comes in at number 5. Balatro is another roguelike, but there's no dungeon crawling in this title. You see, this game is poker based and will see you building a deck by unlocking new cards. At the start of each run you'll choose a deck, with each deck having different types of effects. Each run is split into 8 parts referred to as antes, and each ante consists of 3 blinds, which are the game's version of a battle. Now these blinds get progressively harder, and it wouldn't be a roguelike without boss battles. Defeating blinds rewards you with cash, which allows you to upgrade your deck. Completing runs will get you some better decks, but if you run out of hands to play, that will be the end of your run. But what did the critics have to say? Well, they loved it. Balatro received a 91 on OpenCritic and was recommended by 100% of them. Since it released in February, over 3.5 million copies have been sold, and fair play to the devs on this one, as Balatro was a royal flush. What are the chances of another indie title being on this list? Apparently quite high, as Satisfactory takes our number 4 spot. This is a factory building game with a first-person perspective set within an open world. You assume the role of a pioneer who's sent to a planet filled with resources to build an automated factory. You'll be manufacturing components, collecting resources, and of course upgrading your factory. Now the world is big, measuring in at over 30 kilometers squared, and you'll come across some creatures which can be killed for resources. There is co-op play should you wish to play with some friends, and the level of customization in the game is limitless. The game was in early access, with the full version releasing in September, so yes, I'm still counting this as a 2024 release. Over 5.5 million copies have been sold so far, which is impressive considering this is only on PC. But don't worry my fellow console gamers, as Coffee Stain Studios has confirmed a console version is in the works. It's got a score of 91 on OpenCritic, with 100% recommending the game, and I'm sure you're starting to see a pattern here. It also won the PC Game of the Year award and still has a chance to win the Outstanding Visual Style category at the Steam Awards, and yes, that was a mouthful. Good luck Coffee Stain, and if you win, make sure to go on a 2-day bender and tell your wives you're away on business. The year is 2016 and one of the biggest games is just released in Persona 5. The game's director Katsura Hoshino had worked on the Persona series, including 3, 4 and 5, as well as the Megami Tensei series, and wanted to go in a new direction. On December the 19th, 2016, Hoshino had formed the new team to design an entirely new IP, and the game would be called Metaphor ReFantasio. Metaphor is an RPG that borrows several elements from other Atlas-based games, which you can understand why, as they implemented them so well. So of course that turn-based combat we all love is back, with some real-time action sequences sprinkled in as well. Like Persona, the game places a lot of emphasis on social interactions with your party members, as well as a daily calendar. I'm going to be bold and say if you like Persona, you're going to enjoy Metaphor. If JRPGs are your thing, again you'll enjoy Metaphor, and at this point, if you like games in general, you're going to have a good time with this one. You'll also be glad to know that Shoji Meguro composed the music for the game, who also worked on the Persona series. Now Metaphor has a score of 92 on OpenCritic, being recommended by 98% of them. It sold over 1 million units on day one, making it the fastest selling Atlas game ever. I've seen the game discounted on Amazon and Steam quite frequently, and I picked up my copy cheaper on Black Friday, so you will get the chance to pick it up a little bit cheaper. Now the original Final Fantasy VII was my favourite game on the PS1, and is one of the best games I've ever played. I have every single Final Fantasy game in existence, and even have one of the limited edition Crisis Core PSPs factory sealed. Number 2 is of course Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is the game that I'm actually playing at the moment. The game is an action RPG and is a sequel to the first remake. The game does give a nod to the original by slowing the battle timer down in order to make tactical choices, but turn-based combat is still a thing of the past. But if you've played any Final Fantasy in the last few years, you'll know that's the case anyways. But the combat is executed well and isn't a case of just spamming one button over and over again. You will get invested in the story, and how could you not when the game places an emphasis on Sephiroth, one of the coolest antagonists in gaming history. There is a ton of side quests to do, mini games to play and materia to discover, and to see everything the game is easily over 100 hours long. Now I won't just kiss the game's arse. As good as I think it is, I'm getting slightly bored of all the intel gathering, as it's a bit repetitive, but it is entirely optional. If you're a Final Fantasy fan or like action adventure games, then it's worth checking out this one. Now before we get to the number 1 game on the list, I have an honourable mention. When writing the script, I wanted to make sure that only full games made it on the list with no DLCs, but I'm making an exception for this DLC because it would be a scandal not to. And yes, our honourable mention is the Shadow of Erdtree DLC for Elden Ring. Now I've already fanboyed for Final Fantasy VII, and there will be some more fanboying for Elden Ring. The Soulsborne series is one of my favourites. Dark Souls, Sekiro, Lies of P, and the list goes on and on. For those that aren't aware, these are action RPGs that place a lot of emphasis on challenge, but more specifically boss fights and a vast number of locations to explore. All challenges can be overcome with practice and learning your opponent's moveset. This can result in hours of time being poured into fights, with you making small steps towards victory, but a victory in Elden Ring always feels rewarding. It doesn't matter if you summon your mimic or summon in general, Elden Ring is a must play. Now you may be thinking, hold on a second senor, you didn't really tell us about the DLC. Well, that was intentional. For the best experience, I won't give any details away. Shadow of the Erdtree sold over 5 million copies, and that's still rising. Yes, a DLC sold over 5 million copies. Yes, that is ridiculous, but it is warranted. Some of you may have guessed that Astrobot was going to be number 1 on the list. Now, Astrobot is a 3D platformer that features over 90 levels, split across a multitude of locations. You'll have to rescue a set number of bots in each level in order to meet the bot requirement to progress to the next world. Astro has over 15 new abilities, and whilst we don't need to go into detail, they'll play a big part in platforming as well as against bosses. The game fully utilises the adaptive triggers, haptic feedback as well as gyro controls. So much so that there was a team that worked exclusively on the DualSense controls. Their job was to ensure the controller provided as much feedback as possible. I feel like most developers don't utilise the DualSense controller to its full potential, and I don't know why. The game features characters from other games in the form of VIP bots. Kratos from God of War, the Hunter from Bloodborne, and a Palico from Monster Hunter are some to name a few. OpenCritic gave the game a 95, with over 99% of critics recommending it. The game has sold over 1.5 million copies so far, and also won Game of the Year. I hope you've enjoyed this video, but what did you think about my list? Are there any games you think that I've missed, or do you think that some of these shouldn't have been included? Make sure to let me know in the comments. You've been fantastic, and I'll catch you all in 2025, baby.